on the Relationship Hub, I'm talking to Dr. Andrea and Jonathan Taylor-Cummings, authors of The 4 Habits of All Successful Relationships and founders of 4 Habits Consulting. Now, they've been working with couples and businesses to achieve stronger and successful relationships for over 25 years. And today, they're here to talk openly and honestly about their own marriage and how it went from a place of bliss to an existence which they described as a living hell. Now, from this place of desperation, they sought to learn how to restore and rebuild, unwilling to give up on their relationship. Now, it was this experience that made them utterly determined to play their part in equipping people to do relationships well and prevent unnecessary relationship breakdown, not just for couples, but for everyone. Andrea and John, thank you so much for joining me on the Relationship Hub to talk about your personal story. It's such a pleasure to have you joining me today. Now, in my intro, I referenced some quotes from your book that relate to your relationship, including "The bliss we had previously enjoyed quickly spiraled into a living hell." And so I'd like to understand a bit more about this. It's quite a statement. So let's begin with the bliss. Just let me know how you met and how you knew that you wanted to be married.
I think this is John's favorite part of the story, so he'll get to tell that bit.
Oh, right. The bliss was bliss. I mean, we met at university. We both did our masters together. And the line that we like to use is Andrea came to the UK to get her masters, and she ended up getting her mister as well.
Now you know why he says
That's
that line.
Yeah. How many times have you said that, John?
It was university, so it was doing our masters. It was at Oxford. And the funny part of the story is actually Andrea came on a scholarship to the UK, and the application for the scholarship was actually done by a former boyfriend of hers. So it's really meant to be. So,
sending you away then, Andrea? Was your former boyfriend sending you away to the UK?
Send her straight into my arms. So we met on this program, and it was a 2-year program. I was actually the year ahead of her. Another amusing part of the story is actually when I sort of went away some summer holidays between the years 1 and 2, and there was another guy who was sticking around at the college. And before I came back for year 2, he sent me this note. Everybody called me JTC, and back in the day, my initials. And he said, "JTC, this girl has just arrived at the college, and I reckon by the end of the term, you two will be dating." I'm like, okay, tell me more. There's got to be more here.
And obviously, I knew nothing about this because it took us maybe 2 months of having met before we started dating, and not knowing that I was playing right into the arms of this bet that was going on.
And maybe I was a bit shallow in the day, because when I did first see Andrea, I was thinking, hang on, where is this knockout that's gonna blow me away? Because when I first saw her, she'd just come back from a run. I think she was all in a tracksuit, she was all sweaty. I'm thinking, no, there's got to be somebody else here. But then you see how shallow I am. But then that evening, there was some function, and there was this other completely different person, all nicely turned out, and I'm like, yes, this is
so shallow, John. Honestly.
So yeah, but no, we dated for what?
3 years. For 3 years.
I then left, and Andrea stayed on to do the doctorate. I decided at the end of my masters I was done, needed to get out of there and back out into the wide working world. But
well, while John was working, every now and again we would have conversations about the future and so on. But he would always say, "You're studying. We wouldn't even contemplate getting married while you're studying. Focus on your work. This attention to detail."
Very grown up.
Exactly.
Yes.
And unknown to me, while I was in my final year, I was getting the doctorate. We could see the end of the road. We knew I would have it all done. And then I think John there were 2 thoughts that went through his head.
Well, I realized that once she got the doctorate, she'd be gone. She'd be going back to Jamaica, and that'd be it.
Okay.
I was like, no, we don't want this to happen.
Yeah.
So I thought, you know what, let's do something. So I called her dad to ask for her hand in marriage. And he said to me, why would you want to marry Andrea? And I said, well, I love her, and I think we make a great team.
Oh,
and
nice when you say it together.
Well, there you go. I had no idea about the challenges that lay ahead, but it turned out absolutely right.
Yeah.
So what would you say, Andrea, I was just going to say, what would you say it was about your relationship at that beginning? Because I think sometimes, is it that sense of attraction? Is it spark? Is it friendship? What was it that made you feel as though this is something special?
I would say it's all of the above. And, very early on in the relationship, the way I have always thought about relationships is I will only stay in them if they have some kind of future potential. I had no interest in just having flings. For me, it was always dating was an opportunity to discover more about the other person and see if they could have the potential for being a lifetime partner.
Yeah.
Sorry, partner. And I said this to John, I don't know, we'd just been dating a few months, and it threw him. It was almost like I proposed to him. And all I simply said was, I don't stay in a relationship unless there's a future potential. And boy, his head was in a cloud for.
No, I was a young man in my prime, looking for girlfriends, not looking for a wife at that stage of the game. So this really got me thinking, oh, what is this? Where are we going here?
But I think through that, so yes, it was attraction. But then because we had the opportunity to be on campus together and see each other in different settings without any binding commitment, we were able to develop a really solid friendship. Yeah. We were both in the rowing team. We, obviously we're doing lectures in the same campus area. We had the romance of Oxford to discover together, and just the student life made it easy to see different aspects of this person. His family would visit sometimes, and I'd see that interaction. So the friendship was solid, the friendship that we had.
Yeah. And of course, that decision to marry is such a big one, isn't it? It's a big deal because it is that sense of there's an intentionality to be with this person for life. That's the mindset of choosing to marry. So when you kind of thought, okay, yes, before she goes back to Jamaica, John, I don't want her to go. I want to make this permanent. How did you come to that place of decision? Because I think people can have good friendships. They can feel attracted to each other. But that's almost like, okay, my brain has clicked into the next gear here. What was it that made you feel like, yes, I should do this. I should go ahead?
I am a logical, rational, reasoning person. I was an investment banker, a trader is the career that I went into from Oxford.
And an engineer at heart.
So it's all about logic and reasoning for me. And I look at assets and liabilities, and this was definitely an asset. So I want this asset. I'd love to have this asset with me. So it wasn't yes, of course there was thankfully, yes, of course there was the attraction and you look great, and there was that side of things as well. But for me, it was very much more people talk about trading up. I could definitely see something here that Andrea was an asset in that sense. She would bring something to the party. I thought together we'd make a great team, which is how I articulated it to her dad. Yeah. There's something there that would add to me. So it's almost from a selfish perspective, but yes, this is something good, really good here that we could make work.
Yeah. And Andrea, what about for you? How did what made you think, this is right to do this?
Well, because of my approach to relationships in general, I wouldn't have still been in a relationship with John if I didn't have a belief and a hope that it would develop into something permanent. So for me, I was in love. I loved everything that I'd seen about him. And the only fear I had about getting married was that something would happen to either of us and the day wouldn't actually happen. But of course, there's a lot of naivety in there because, when you're in your early 20s and life is a bed of roses, who even thinks about what you're really committing to down the road? Yes. But no, it was we were in a very good place, and it was a great place to start, and very exciting and very romantic when he proposed. And I think part of it is he also wanted, before I got the doctorate, that I would be Dr. Taylor-Cummings rather than Dr. Wright. He wanted to secure the surname.
Change the name first.
Excellent.
She was gracious to be able to want to change the name or to be happy to change the name. So.
Yeah, and you couldn't live with the idea of kind of being, in relationship with Dr. Wright. That would be too much, John, wouldn't it?
Well, that would be wrong, wouldn't it?
Okay, so things have started well, and you talk in your book about your incredible first year of marriage, which is interesting because often people find the first year tricky because they're adjusting to things. But you tell a different story. Tell me about what happened in that first year and what made it so, incredible.
That was such a foundation in our relationship. We went into it with everything working well. We were in careers, we're earning good money, enjoying what we were doing, growing and developing together. But the opportunity to go away from all kinds of influence, from families, from friends, from even the culture we were accustomed to a completely different environment, different language. It was an amazing experience of just being able to gel together, wasn't it?
I'm going to say, I think for me, that was the biggest thing. I was I still am very close to my family. And I think as a young person, I was used to turning to mum and dad for advice and guidance and so on. And I think being 12 time zones away from them and from, Andrea's family was even further away. Yeah. But by this point, she'd already had a couple of years, 3-4 years of living in the UK away from her parents. I was still very around and close to my parents. I think being away from all family influences and close friends and so on gave us that opportunity to just gel as a couple. There's nobody else to turn to now, or at least not in our time zone. The end of a phone, you've got to wait for them to wake up and so on. So we had the chance to really make decisions for ourselves. And I think that was really what was great.
That was very special. And, I was in consulting, and the irony is we lived in Tokyo, in Japan, which is where John's office was based. But my assignment was in Seoul in South Korea. So I would be traveling Monday to Friday to Seoul in South Korea.
And I'd be working all hours God sent,
And John had very long days. So, and this was before FaceTime and all the kind of Zoom and connections that we had. This was 30 years ago. So or 28. So we made a decision to be very specific about how we used our time when we were together. And I would get back on a Friday evening. Saturday was our day. We didn't arrange to go anywhere, no shopping, no friends. That was our time. We had a great onsen baths, tubs that we could sit in, have olives floating on plates and sit and just chat, and really had the whole day to ourselves, pajama days. And then on a Sunday when we would go to church, that's when we would meet up with friends and do the supermarkets and do all the out and out stuff. So we really defended us time to have really quality conversations and quality time together when we were together.
I think there's a couple of interesting things that you've said there. I think one is that sense of how it's important to transition from being, before marriage, away from your family. Not that your family an important part of that, and having them supporting you, but that sense of actually turning to one another. And that's such an important part of developing a relationship and marriage together, isn't it? So I think that's a really good thing that you've mentioned that, and interesting that you were absolutely thrown into this. There's no other way anyway. Yeah. But also defending time together. I really like the way you've worded that, actually, Andrea, that sense of ring fencing and defending. We need quality time together because we need that for our relationship to thrive and work. And that's something that I've heard said so many times because it's true. So that's a really good point that you've made there. So
that's what you do in the beginning when the relationship's starting. You make sure you have time together, and more than ever, you need to do that after you're married to preserve what you've had,
keep it going,
and leaving the influence of the other households as much as you love them, and creating your own household is fundamental. I think that's what worked really well.
I couldn't recommend that bit any more highly. I mean, if you get the opportunity to actually go away, take it, grab it with both hands. But if you don't, then you've got to be intentional about actually turning to each other for, okay, well, that's how we used to do it, but now how do we want to do it as this unit? How do we want to take our own decisions and what's important to us?
No, that's great advice. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on then. You did this year in Japan. You returned to the UK, but you made some very significant career choices at this point. Tell me about those, because it's kind of major, isn't it?
Kind of major. I think we were young. We were invincible. We had degrees under our belt. We had professional career experiences, and I think we're entrepreneurs at heart. Yeah. And so we thought, we've always wanted to start a business. Now that we're transitioning back into the UK, why don't we transition in careers as well? Let's start a business. How hard can it be?
How hard?
We didn't even know quite.
3 months. 3 months is how long it took us to discover just how hard it could be.
We weren't even quite sure which business to start, but John's family already had a business in keyboard and computer training courses. So we decided to start a recruitment business because we could their output could be our input kind of thing was the initial thinking. And then even that we transitioned and focused on the skill sets that we were accustomed to in management consulting and professional services. Yeah. So that's what we did.
So you said, how hard can it be? And John, you just said 3 months in, you found out how hard it could be. So what happened to, how did this going into business affect your marriage or relationship together?
Well, hugely.
Yeah, hugely.
The big question, isn't it?
I finally came to the realization that Andrea wasn't the mini-me that I was hoping for.
It wasn't quite the asset you'd imagined from the outset.
I could see she was an asset, but she was just of a different form. I was hoping that she would do things the way I did things. Had very clear ideas on how things should be done. And when she didn't do them like me, to be fair, I already knew she did things slightly differently, because even when we studied together, I've always been a workaholic at heart and very focused, a hard graft kind of a person. So if I've got exams coming up, I will just stay there, head down, study, go to the exam. If I'm feeling tired, either go to sleep or shower or something, but focus there. Andrea now would be completely different. She'd work for 2-3 hours. She'd go and watch Oprah for an hour, and she'd go back in another couple of hours, and she'd go for a walk. I'm like, what are you doing? Stay focused. But I realized we had different approaches, and actually, even from then, I started. Maybe I should have given it more credit. Yes, because I realized that it clearly worked for her, because she would then end up getting sometimes even better grades than me. I'm like, how do you do this thing?
Yeah. So
I should have realized from then that we were quite different. But in the work world, I thought, I had it together, and this is how it should be done, and so on. And I had very clear ideas on how work should be presented. And when she presented it differently, that caused me a bit of a challenge.
And that's because there was a lot of tension around it, because it was a transition, not just to working together, but from having double income and being able to afford whatever we wanted, to suddenly needing to create that income. So the pressure of the finances, the pressure of discovering bits about our personality that we didn't recognize and sometimes really didn't like, and grating against each other's difference, and spending a lot of time judging, criticizing, expecting the other person to do exactly what we want. We both have what we call, lion personalities, where, we're very clear on what we want and very want to lead. That's where it became rather a bit of a challenge at times.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, as you say, you've put everything into this. So it's kind of your livelihood and potentially your relationship is on the line. So obviously, I'm sure that throughout that time there was, challenges, conflict, and that sense of almost, what have we done, or what's happened here, and almost not recognizing one another. So, as you described at the beginning, you sort of started off thinking, we're really going to live the dream here. This is all just fantastic. We're skilled, we've got these degrees, and you've actually said, no, it's the opposite. And referencing again what you said in your book, which I referred to, this living hell. Now, when a relationship sinks to that level, many would be thinking, do you know what? I'm out of here. I'm not hanging around, because clearly we've got this wrong. We've grown apart. This isn't good anymore. This is not what it was. So what was it, do you think, that made you think, okay, no, we're not going to do this? How did you get from that place of describing it as a living hell to saying, but we're going to stay in this living hell and try and do something about it?
Well, I'm just going to say very quickly there, just to give you an understanding of the picture, the office was in the room next door, not in this house, but in the house we lived in at the time. So literally, we would be in that room. They're all set up, and we'd be having arguments. And then the end of the day would come, and we'd still be unhappy with each other. And then now you've got to go to bed. Now you've got to go into the same bed, lying next to this person that you're already upset with, and you're not happy. You're just sort of turned away. Am I going to sleep like this? And then you get up, and tomorrow's the same, and repeat the same thing. So it really was not.
It was frightening, actually, because it was so far removed from everything we'd experienced before and everything we'd known about each other, that it was really frightening and really hard and intense, because it's not just the marriage on the line or finances on the line, what's going to happen in the future. Really frightening on all those fronts. But I think there are a number of things that kept us together. The first is, when we got married, we meant it. We made a commitment that even though we didn't know what better or worse would look like, we got married assuming it would all be better. It would just keep getting better and better. No idea of what worse could be. But the because of the respect that we had for each other and the respect for the friendship, and also our faith was a big part of that. We'd agreed early on that divorce wasn't going to be the first option or even the second option. When we made that decision, we committed to finding a way forward to make it work and to get back what we had. I suppose we don't take decisions lightly. We're both very stubborn is a good word. I think we're both very stubborn, but when we make a decision, we're committed to it and we'll find a way forward. So I think that's something we have in common.
And I think just to add to that, I think I've never really thought of divorce as an option. I mean, thankfully my parents were together, and all up until we lost my dad, until he passed away a few years ago. And Andrea's likewise, parents always stayed together. So for me, the assumption was that you would stay together. Maybe I was, I don't know, blinkered or what have you in that, but that's kind of just that was my paradigm. That's what you do.
Yeah.
And now the question was, okay, well, how do we get through this? How do we figure this out? I'm sure I wasn't foolish. I'm sure they must have had their own challenges, but somehow they worked it out. We were going to have to work it out too.
Yeah.
And really fortunate to come across some material through Andrea's sister. Actually shared some stuff with us. It really just started opening our eyes. And for me, I think the biggest thing was to recognize I could certainly see my own strengths. I was, maybe my ego allowed me to do that very well, but I couldn't I couldn't see my weaknesses. It's only really until I started seeing strengths in Andrea that I didn't have, that I started to realize, actually, you know what? In relative terms, I said, I must have weaknesses. She's got something that I don't have here. And for me, and then actually putting value on those things was where it really started to say, okay, she's bringing something to the table here that I really couldn't see before. Then there's some value here. So let's work on this.
So we were, because our differences were actually our strengths, but they grated against each other until we understood the difference. So John is gifted with attention to detail and produces absolute quality, takes his time over it. But I mean, what he produces is brilliant. I didn't even, you do. I didn't even appreciate that. I thought he was being nitpicking and annoying just for no reason. I just didn't understand that was his gift. And he didn't realize that was his gift because he assumed everybody thinks that way and everybody behaves that way.
And anything else is just being lazy. Why don't you do it and deliver to the same sort of standard I'm doing things?
Whereas some things I genuinely just didn't see. He didn't realize I didn't see it. He thought I saw what he saw, things that needed to be fixed, and just chose not to do it. But I am more creative and big picture, and I'll come up with the ideas, and they might not be, usually they're not that formed or completely thought through, but there is some real gem in there if you have the patience to look. But if you're a completer finisher and you want the presented idea, sometimes you won't even recognize that. So we had a lot of these destructive arguments, tearing each other down in the very strengths that we brought to the table until we discovered what was different.
And I think just to finish that, because it was easy for me to think that what I could bring to the table and deliver was 100% of what was needed. Yeah. It's only when I realized actually there was some other stuff here which was completely in my blind side. I hadn't seen that stuff at all. But now those are some good ideas. Let's add them into the mix here. That I think for me was where I thought, this is so much better together.
Yeah. And it's interesting because having read your book and seeing, some of the stuff you're saying, I'm recognising from the text that I've read, and that sense of self-awareness. It's that self-awareness and awareness of others, because it's very easy when you're in a place of pain to just look at your own injuries, but actually trying to look outside of that to solve the problem is what you're describing, which is so crucial, isn't it, in relationships becoming stronger and coming out of desperation, if you like. Yeah. So you mentioned about you'd got some materials from Andrea's sister, and this was how you started to kind of try and build or come out of this place. So tell me a bit more about, what that was, because I think, again, maybe it's your logical side, John, and Andrea, I don't know what your thinking was, but that sense of, okay, well, let's get some materials to try and improve things. Not everybody would rush to do that. How did you find that, and how did you navigate getting materials and applying that to your relationship?
We were kind of looking everywhere to see. We weren't at the place yet of going to divorce lawyers, and you know, we weren't at
Yeah.
that extreme. And I think what was helpful is that we had a boundary, an assumption that it's painful right now, but we're going to find a way to work it out. So
Okay.
that put a ring fence around the relationship and took the fear of, you know, we're going to split and all of that out of it.
Yeah.
And so it was trying to understand. I think we're thinkers. We like to process things. And it was trying to understand what changed, what happened, what's become such an irritation that we're turning up as two different people in this context.
Yeah.
And so we kept reading and looking to see, kind of helping our own relationship, what's out there. And the two things that really helped us then, one was understanding fundamental differences and that people genuinely view life have a different worldview, a different perspective on things. And the other was the emotional bank account, was it? Yeah. Where we understood how our behavior, even if it's the way we're wired, can land well or land badly with somebody else just because they're wired differently, they see things differently, and things impact them differently. Becoming more aware of how what we were doing was landing with the other helped us.
Yeah.
Like you say, none of us turn up to relationships or go into relationships looking for a miserable time.
No.
But there are things that we're doing that are landing badly with the other person.
Yeah.
And those are the things we need to firstly identify what they are. And as much as possible, stop doing them, or at least minimize doing them, because maybe it's just a part of us and what we've done and so on. We do it with the best will in the world sometimes, but it comes across badly. Or we do it unthinkingly and it lands badly.
Yeah.
Find out what those are and stop doing them. Because, well, this concept of the emotional bank account, if we have a second just to share that, essentially all it is a mental record that we keep of every interaction we have with the person around us.
Okay.
If it's a good interaction, it's a cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching deposit into the account. If it's a bad interaction, it's a withdrawal. It's just sucking the life out of the account all the time, taking it down.
Yeah.
Now, the quality of the relationship at any point in time is simply, it's just the balance in the account. So if it's a positive balance, the relationship feels good, maybe even feels great. If it's a negative balance, it can feel pretty nasty.
Yeah.
What you want to do is, and every time you make a withdrawal, you're taking that balance down.
Yes.
The best chance of having a successful or a nice feeling, a good feeling relationship is to have that account in positive territory. So to do that, you've got to both stop making the withdrawals and make deposits to keep that balance in positive territory.
Yeah.
So important to be able to do that.
That really helped us understand what was going on and become even more aware of how what we were doing was landing with each other.
Yeah.
Sometimes it meant choosing to do the right thing rather than the thing you felt like doing, because quite often the thing you feel like doing will make you feel good in the moment, but it might not land so well. And we had to dig deep and grow up in some areas, emotionally become more responsible for our own behavior and the impact that was having.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense, because I think you know that when you say something positive or do something that impacts someone in a really positive way, I see it in my children and how they kind of grow in that moment where they're feeling really good about themselves, and then the opposite is true when you're having conflict with them or there's difficulty, and you can see the life zapping, and people kind of have these tolerance levels, and if they get to that point when they drop below that, then it becomes quite dysfunctional. So I think it's a really good analogy, this emotional bank account. How are we investing? And knowing that there is an emotional bank account helps us become, I think, more self-aware with the people around us. Saying all of this, obviously, easier said than done, and we're not always going to get it right. And I'm sure must have been moments where, even though you've become more aware, where it all went a bit crazy and things didn't quite land in the way they should have done. So in those moments, what do you do for you to, when you were kind of working through this place of thinking, okay, we've got to work at our marriage here, we're learning new skills, we're recognizing things about each other. When you had those moments when you dipped in your emotional bank accounts, what happened? What did you do about that?
Oh, it was awful. That's where we would, our worst selves would show up, and we would do and say things that we're not that proud of after. We had to become really good at learning to be humble and to apologize and to do whatever it would take to get the relationship back into a more free-flowing, easygoing conversation again.
Yeah. I would say sometimes I would do things that I would have always have done, but now I get a different response. And for me, that's a great big wake-up call to say, actually, you know what, the emotional bank account is not in a good place here.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been a problem before. Why is it a problem now? So for me, that's normally a trigger to say, actually, what I now need to do is start making deposits. So it's about making Andrea feel what I find has worked, and it's not a lever that you can kind of just pull the lever and paying you back into positive territory, but it's about making Andrea feel special again.
Yeah.
I think for us a big challenge has always been, if ever either of us feels just taken for granted, and over time just more and more taken for granted, that is a big drainer on the account. So it's again about saying, actually, you know what, I don't want you to feel taken for granted here, going out of my way to do things, to say things. If we get a chance to talk about the habits at some point, certainly one of the things that works is the love languages. What we've tried to do in the work that we do today and sharing stuff with people is look for what are the best tools out there. And from anybody. We're not precious. Some of the stuff we've made up ourselves and developed ourselves over the years, but there's other stuff good work that other people have done. We say, okay, let's borrow that and talk to them, and of course, with their permission, use some of their material. But certainly the love language has been a very powerful part of that. And I know Andrea is very much a words person and a touch person, and neither of those come naturally to me. So for me, it's a recognition or a reminder to actually use words, to praise Andrea, to tell her how good she's doing, and she is doing a great job. It just doesn't, it's not on my radar to tell her that normally.
And
it's a reminder to myself to actually tell her and do things like that.
And because of John's precision and attention to detail, it's easier for him to spot where things have gone wrong and speak about that rather than, it was like a double whammy for me as a words person, being criticized rather than being told great things. And just that awareness has made such a difference when you hold back on some of you can do this better and talk more about the things that are going great. So it's in one sense, it's really simple things, but emotions are a huge part of how we relate and interact with each other. And when emotions are drained or you feel wronged in any way, that can create huge gaps and distances in the relationship. So it's becoming more alert to the things that cause that distance to increase, and instantly or as soon as possible doing something to redress that. And I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that marriage is basically a constant forgiveness. It's an act, a look of just constant forgiveness and kindness and tenderness. Putting that into practice sometimes is not what you feel like doing in the moment, but that's the thing that delivers the results you're after.
So there's like a decision.
Learning to do that.
A decision attached to that, isn't there? There's that mental choice sometimes, even when you don't feel like something, to do that anyway. Okay.
And I guess a recognition also, do very quickly there to add, a recognition that if the other person is upset, there's probably something that you've done that has triggered that. And I'm not saying you've necessarily, it's all on you, but there's something that you've done that hasn't worked for them. So just recognizing that, searching for that, what could it possibly have been, maybe even asking them that, but recognizing that it's a two-way thing.
That's a really important point, because I think when we feel right about something, we therefore feel as though we can justify everything that's said and been said and done. But actually, if there's, as you say, if there's pain for the other person, you have to look back at your actions and look to correct that, don't you? So I think that's a really good point. So you're building your relationship and things are improving. So what happened to your business? I've just taken us back from it. You've given everything, every sort of skill that you've had today. You've thought, let's start this business. Then your relationship's been challenged, and then you're building back again. So did you carry on in business? What happened next?
We did.
We absolutely did. And actually, what we did, which really helped us, was learn to play to our strengths. I was very much the attention to detail person, as we've spoken about. So we actually divvied up responsibilities between us, and I focused on the stuff that I was good at, the legal, the accounts, the compliance, the numbers, all that kind of stuff. And Andrea focused on the creative side of things, the people side of things, the HR, the strategy, some of the strategy we did together, but the more creative side of things is probably the best way to put it. And I think once we allowed each other to play to our strengths and left each other to play to our strengths and didn't sort of get too involved in each other's, it wasn't a case of
we just
this is mine, this is yours. It was more, you take the lead on this. Of course, we're both responsible for both, but I'll take the lead on this, you take the lead on that. Yeah. And that's when it started to really work well together, I'd say.
Yeah, we became team. We really learned what it was like to be team and to respect each other's strengths. So, and that's what's been a mainstay of our relationship through all the different twists and turns of life that we've experienced.
I was going to say, just to add quickly, so I came from my initial career was investment banking. I was a trader, and the trading environment on the trading floor in the city is a very harsh, at least certainly was back then in the early 90s. It was a very hard, if you think of the sort of Wolf of Wall Street type environment, it was very, it was a very cutthroat kind of environment. That's what I was used to. It was deliver me the results or get out of my face, the kind of thing was the environment I came from.
Doesn't work for a while, I have to say.
Doesn't work so well there at all. But as a result, when we did the personality profile that we talk about in the book, I scored 0 literally on something we call the golden retriever, which is really the heart of the whole matter, the sort of warm relational side of things. For me, give me the results or move on. It's how I used to think. I've certainly grown a long way since then. But thankfully, Andrea will tell you that. So for me, I realized that initially in the business, once we started hiring people and growing the team and so on, for me, I was more focused on the results than actually caring for the employees. And so it meant that the environment wasn't necessarily the nicest environment. So I decided actually I'll step away from that, let Andrea lead that. She was so gifted in doing that and keeping people on side and making the environment a nice place. You know what? And I'd be sort of watching from a distance and learning, because it's not something I grew up with, certainly in my career.
No, the banking world,
but I started to place a value on it and actually having a decent work environment for the people if we wanted them to stay. So I certainly started learning from her as well there.
Yeah, so we learned to pull together in the same direction and use our strengths to help fuel the goals that we had. And we ran the business successfully for 10 years. We moved out of the house into offices, first on Oxford Street, then on Regent Street, and then we moved to where our office was established in Great Russell Street, just opposite the British Museum. So we had a wonderful time creating or recreating our income and having the flexibility to take time off when we needed to, having staff in place. So
all went well until 9/11 and children. I think that was then the next chapter of our lives.
Okay, and that was the point I was going to come on to next, because there's a quote again in your book, and it is regarding having children. And you wrote, "It took 7 long years and a whole lot of trauma and heartache to have our first child." So you've gone through all these challenges as a couple. You've grown, learnt, changed, and things are going well. And then 7 years trying for a child. So that must have been very trying on you as a couple. Tell me a bit more about that experience and how it impacted on you two together in your relationship.
Yeah, that was a long journey. And looking back now, once you have the children, you wonder, if I had known then that we would end up having the family we wanted, would it have been so traumatic? But it was really foundational to our relationship again, because we had the choice to pull apart or pull together. And thankfully, building on what we'd already gone through, we had more of the tools to be able to pull together. But there were fears for me around it. You know, John's from West Africa, and in my head I was thinking, for an African man to be married to a woman who can't produce children, you know, what does that mean for him? What's it going to do to his?
So it's cultural challenges
in my head. You know, John,
that certainly wasn't in my head, but in hers.
But these are it was mentally. I felt like, you know, I had the Rhodes Scholarship, I had the degrees, I had a doctorate, I'd worked in consulting, and yet in my mind, the one thing I was put on this earth to do is the way I was thinking, to produce children. I wasn't able to do it. And it felt like everybody around me was having children. Even one, our receptionist at the time wasn't even trying to have children, wasn't even in a stable relationship. And next thing you know, she's pregnant and I'm not. And it was very, very painful. But one of the, one of the most precious memories that I still carry of that time is one Mother's Day, where every Mother's Day was painful. You know, everybody around me was having kids. We were the first to get married of our siblings, 2 siblings on each side. They all got married after us. One by one, they took all the first grandchild, first grandson, first granddaughter. All the firsts had gone. They'd gone on to second children. I think one sister might have even gotten pregnant on holiday in our house. And I'm like, that's just not fair. So it was really hard. But this one Mother's Day, bless John, knowing how painful it was, seeing all this celebration and feeling left out, John bought a Mother's Day card for me. And I can't even remember the words you wrote, but I just still remember the feeling of just such support, saying, don't worry, one day, but you're still basically perfect as you are. I don't even remember the words, but it just, I remember feeling so supported and so loved, even if we didn't have children. That's one of the great memories.
Yeah, and it was definitely something that brought us together, I think, saying this sense that, we'll just keep trying. We will have children at some point. Let's just keep doing what we can do.
Yeah.
And we did everything trying to have children.
Well, how about that time with the doctors? You remember that?
Well, yeah. So when I say we did everything, we literally went through everything. We did IVF. We did. I can't think what.
I like the we.
Yeah,
I had major surgery.
Andrea
joint decision.
She went through major surgery.
For endometriosis and fibroids. All the things that they thought might have been preventing children. But there's this one telling moment with the doctors. We were with, what's he called? Lord Winston's team at Hammersmith.
So literally was at the time, the best in the country in terms of IVF teams and supplies and so on. And they tried everything. We had 2 rounds, I think, of IVF, and Andrew's body just wasn't responding. And so they called us in, and
which was telling, because usually they're so busy. John was late. He was held up at a client meeting, and usually they'd have just gone ahead with the meeting with just me, because they don't have time to postpone or wait on people to turn up. But on that day, they said, it's okay, we'll wait until John comes. And I should have known something was up, but it just didn't click.
Yeah. But then anyway, long story short, he sat us down and he said, look, guys, we've tried, but I'm sorry to have to say that there's nothing that modern medical science could do for you anymore. You probably will never have children. And we thought, okay, all right, that's interesting.
That must have been just a horrific moment for you, that sinking that, receiving that information. It must have been so hard.
It was literally stunning. I walked out of the hospital stunned and in 2 minds, where one is absolute desperation, nowhere else to go. What do I do now? And the other was surrender, saying, okay, God, if this is going to happen, it's in your hands. Yeah. And people talk about, maybe we had children after that because we relaxed. I didn't relax. You can't relax. How do you relax when you've just been told, there's nothing else? Yeah.
If you'd been through all of that and all of that process, if it was easy to just relax, that would have been at the top of the list to try from the outset. I mean, really and truthfully. So that you obviously did go on to have children, but that period of time when you were told you couldn't to when you then did conceive, it wasn't very long, but nevertheless, you must have been really, having to kind of hold one another up in that time. I mean, did it mean that you push each other apart a bit, or did it draw you even closer, do you think, in that moment?
Well, I think what I would say there is, our faith definitely carried us through there. I mean, there's an experience that we had a few years before that, even, where we happened to be in church one day, minding our business off to the side, and there was this visiting preacher, and never met this guy from Adam. And anyway, long story short, he picked us out of the crowd towards the end and said, look, there's this couple here, I'd like to pray for you. And as he prayed for us, he said, there's an issue in your life, isn't there? And we said, issue? What issue? And he said, children an issue. And we said, well, yeah, actually.
And it had only been an issue for about a year or
2 years after trying. Anyway, he said to us, the Lord has shown me your son. You will have a son, and he'll be with you in your ministry down the road. And we thought, okay, that's interesting. Hallelujah. Hey, we're going to have a son.
Yeah.
And then, 4, 5, 6 years on, we still no son. But at that point, we sort of remembered back to that when the doctor said, nothing we can do. And we said, okay, God, maybe you didn't want to share your glory with the doctors. If we're going to have children, maybe it's up to you.
Totally up to you.
And that kind of gave us a peace. I think our faith gave us a peace there. And what happened after that?
But it really was about us pulling together, realizing it could push us apart. There are different moments that you have decisions to make about how you're going to deal with this.
Yeah.
And thankfully, the fears that I had about John coming from Africa and then hunting for somebody else who could give him a child wasn't real. I every time that he could have behaved in one way, he always behaved in a way that was caring and supportive.
I didn't know that was an option.
And it still ain't.
I think the phrase you keep coming back to, which is a really good one, and I hope for people listening, they kind of take hold of that. It's that pulling together, not pushing apart, because that's a really simple phrase, but gives such a huge amount of hope, because it comes back to us being responsible and accountable for our own actions in order to make something work. And obviously that we know that some marriages and relationships won't work. But I think one of the things, coming back to your book, that you talk about is that actually there is unnecessary breakdown that can happen. There's breakdown that happens because there's no other way. But there is a lot of unnecessary breakdown. And it's about, as you in your book, I mean, I know we're going to talk more about that at another time, but the skills that you need to actually grow relationships. And you are not only people that write about it, you have been through the experience, haven't you? You've done the, the whole lot, the whole, kind of process of learning. And I think, just as a quick aside, I think that's what makes your book so sort of profound, because actually you're not just spouting clever things that you've read or heard or put together. You are talking from the very depths of your own emotions and hearts and experience. And that just speaks volumes. And thank you for talking about that situation with having children, because I think it's such an emotive thing for people to deal with. And for couples, there are couples that would absolutely end up pushing each other apart. But I think from what I have understood, the skills that you learn almost when you were trying to save your marriage earlier on, almost equipped you to face that new trial. And we build, don't we, all the time on our experiences. All the time our experiences create new foundations if we're willing to see them through. And your story is of one of that, exactly.
Just to jump in for a second there, I would say we've absolutely faced the hurdles, and we've probably dragged ourselves over the hurdles to get to where we are now. Yeah. And what we say to what you're saying just now, Michaela, is that in our experience, all the relationships we've seen, every single one faces hurdles. Most people just aren't equipped to get over those hurdles. So they hit one hurdle, the next, and they say, actually, you know what, maybe this is the wrong person. Maybe I'm going to just opt out of this and go find another race to run with somebody else. What happens there, of course, they start hitting other hurdles. So really what we're saying is you want to be just equipping yourself as early as possible on this journey. You're going to face hurdles. You might not think so. You might think it's all, hey, this person is great. We're going to be fine. We'll get
the happily ever after, isn't it? The happily ever after.
Dream where we're going. No, you're going to face hurdles. You just want to be prepared to get over those hurdles as smoothly and efficiently as possible. Otherwise you're just gonna have a miserable time. So get over the hurdles. Learn to work together. Get over the hurdles, and then you can actually enjoy the relationship.
I think if we let it, marriage is an amazing, safe environment for us to become the best of who we are, because we all end up in a marriage or in a committed relationship with a certain level of relational skills, which might have been formed through other life experiences or just might not even have been fully developed yet. And as you live intimately up close with somebody, everything becomes bare, your strengths, your weaknesses, your idiosyncrasies. And if you can embrace loving challenge and still be there for each other, you become a better version of yourself through the process. Sometimes we went through those changes kicking and screaming because we didn't like what was being said and we didn't want to hear it. But the foundation of being there for each other and pulling together helped us grow to turn up better in our own relationships, to have better conversations and to get better outcomes. Yeah. And that's what I think we all sign up for when we get married. We just sometimes don't want to do the hard work to get there.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think there's such huge hope in what you're describing, because I do think when people feel like they're floundering and they don't know how to do something, they just want to opt out. And that's no judgment on people, because we can all face that in situations that we're in life, whether that's in workplaces, whether that's, in parenting, whether that's, in a particular skill or craft that we have. You think, I can't do this anymore. I'm stopping, etc.
The grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah, and it's that coming back to that point of, no, actually we can equip ourselves. Now, the thing that I loved about, from your book, and I obviously knew a bit about this having known you prior to reading the book, but just your own experiences led you to that place of saying, hang on a second, if we're going through this, others are too. And that really changed the course of your lives, didn't it? Tell us what happened after you'd gone through this process and difficulty in terms of the relationship webinars and workshops and things you've done. Tell me a bit about that journey.
Well, it was from the early days when we came across the material that helped us realize that the things that were frustrating and irritating us the most were actually our strengths, which were unrecognized, unappreciated, and out of balance, because too much of your strength is really what can grate hard on the other person. That was such a light bulb moment for us that we were thinking, why hadn't we been told this before? And if we're going through it, given the strength of a relationship we knew we came into the marriage with, who else might this be affecting in a way that it wouldn't have to be so painful for them if we just shared the insight that we got?
Yeah.
And while nobody else was talking about their challenges, when we started sharing with our excitement what we had learned, everybody was happy to hear. They were happy to listen. So there was an appetite there. They were like, oh, okay, we might be going through stuff ourselves, but tell us more. So there was that. And so we thought, hang on, you know what? The reality is, and in fairness, over time, of course, other people, our friends and family, started sharing some of the challenges that they went through once they realized the benefit of what we were doing. And I think it was just that recognition that actually, you know what, if it's not just us, it's not just friends and family, everybody really is going through these challenges. What else can we be doing to get this out there? Because there is nothing, as far as we could see, apart from, fairness to them, the only real equipping for relationships is maybe in a church context where a handful of people may go to the vicar or pastor or what have you before they get married for a premarital course or something. But that really is all there is out there. And then the marriage course. And then the marriage course after. And so, but there's very little out there, certainly outside of the church, there's very little out there for people to equip themselves with, relationship skills. There are a handful of, self-help books out there online and so on, but there's nothing. The mindset is, we go into this, we'll be fine. And when we're not, then, okay, maybe we can go for counseling. We found that is often too little, too late. You're going to face the hurdles, learn about it up front. You don't buy a car, get on the road and start driving without learning how to drive first. Why do you expect in a relationship? Why do you think that's going to work?
Completely. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
We got really excited by it because it was just understanding the differences made such a huge impact in how we turned up to each other, how we appreciated each other, and how we worked things through and how we divided up roles and responsibilities. So it created this hunger, this appetite to find out, well, what else is out there that we don't know? And so we became consumers of information about relationships. And as we consumed, we shared, and we just kept sharing it with any audience that we could get in front of. So first it was our immediate circle of family and friends, and then we worked with our church, and then we worked out into the community. And as we shared the information, we started to refine it into the nuggets, the key points that really landed well and gave people something to act on and make a difference in their relationships. And as the audiences got bigger, we moved from it just being about couples to it being about fundamental relationship skills, because in the community you would have couples and singles and young adults and teens and so on.
But I'd say one other trigger that made us think actually we need to do more about this is just seeing in our circle of friends, even so sort of mums and dads at schools and so on, just seeing the number of relationships dropping like flies. One after another would be announcing that they're separating or divorcing. And we're like, come on, this is these numbers this is just way too many. Too many now.
Too many.
What else can we be doing to support them? Because it's not. There wasn't anything fundamental. These were nice people, good people, just couldn't see eye to eye on something and just weren't equipped to be able to have those conversations to get them through. We thought, no, we've got to do something about this.
That's a really good point. The question, what breaks your heart? every time we heard about a divorce or a separation, that broke our hearts, because we knew that could have been our story, but we've discovered things, in addition to our faith, that underpins the way we approach everything in life. But we also found some practical things that could help us negotiate these hurdles and arguments and come out stronger with better understanding rather than damaging the relationship. And so we've been doing webinars and workshops and seminars alongside the day job for the better part of 25 years. And then 5 years ago, we both came to a point in our career where we became unsettled. We realized that there must be something more. Maybe it's hitting 50 and deciding, what's my life going to count for? And through different paths, we got to the same point of saying, if ever we're going to do something with relationships, we're going to do it now. And then we had that kind of kick in the teeth when we heard that the sixth of this group of 8 couples who were friends that moved together, the sixth one announced their separation and divorce. We said, that's it. If all we have to offer is this, one, what's it, 5 loaves and 2 fish. If that's all we have to offer, we're going to do our part to help turn this tide on relationship breakdown. And so that's how the business was birthed 5 years ago.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. And I know obviously we've spoken prior to this interview about doing a series of interviews on the book itself. But obviously we've referenced it. Your book has, it came out sort of in May. So it will be good there's a couple of things I want to ask before we end. I could honestly talk to you for ages. There's so many interesting things and there's so much wisdom in what you're saying and humility. And I think it's amazing what you've done and what you're still doing. So perhaps you could just very briefly give us an overview of the 4 habits to all successful relationships, because, that I can't leave that out of this interview. So what are the 4 habits, just very briefly, and we'll visit them at another time in more detail.
Yeah. So habit 1, be curious, not critical, is all about taking the time to understand fundamental differences so that rather than judging and criticizing each other, you treasure hunt for the strength that comes in the differences. And it's usually the things that frustrate that are the differences.
And then when we don't get those right, habit 2, be careful not crushing, is absolutely essential. It's about how do you address conflict? How do you turn up to conflict in a way that actually, once you get through the conflict, you're proud of how you turned up. Because quite often, sometimes in the conflict situations, we can't manage ourselves properly. We allow emotions to run wild, and we can end up being crushing in a conflict situation. It's about, okay, how do you control that inner bad person and actually turn up in a way that's helpful to the relationship, and you can actually use conflict to come out stronger as a relationship than rather than damage the relationship. So habit 2 is be careful not crushing, especially in conflict situations.
And habit 3, ask, don't assume, recognizes the fact that we all come to relationships with expectations based on our values, our beliefs, our assumptions around what makes a good husband, wife, partner, parent, and we dump those expectations on the other person without discussing it. And usually that causes deep-seated visceral responses when those assumptions get crossed. So habit 3, ask, don't assume, is about developing the skills to recognize your assumptions, clarify values, agree how you're going to make things work in this relationship, and have courageous conversations around things that matter when we need to.
Okay, last habit, John.
And then habit number 4, connect before you correct, really is about showing value on purpose. There is a quote that we love, which simply says, people go where they feel welcomed, but they stay where they feel valued. If you want the people in your lives to stick around, you have to make them feel valued. And unfortunately, for a lot of us, we find it easier to criticize when things don't work out rightly, or correct people. You're not doing it quite the right way. My way is the right way. If you just tweak it a little bit, you can get it right. And we're saying, no. Build the connection. Focus on building the connection. That's how people feel valued and people stick around in the relationship.
Communicate love and value. So it's all about building honesty, vulnerability, respect, trust, strong emotional connection in relationships. That's what the 4 habits deliver.
And just in terms of why they work, just very quickly, the first habits 1 and 2 help you minimize the unintentional withdrawals from the emotional bank account we spoke about. And habits 3 and 4 are what you need to learn and make part of your daily turn up to life. to make deposits into that emotional bank account.
Yeah. Okay. Now, there's lots more for us to explore there. So I think pretty much my last question here is, in your book, you wrote, life together felt desperate. We each felt the person we married had changed. Now, having been in that place and experienced all that you've spoken about today as a couple, in terms of parent, everything that's gone through, and being relationship practitioners, not just couple relationships within the workplace and so on, if you could give one piece of advice to a couple who are saying, I'm desperate, this is not the person I married, what would it be? Just one piece of advice. You've got a whole book full of great stuff, but what would it be?
I would say make the decision on whether or not this is the relationship worth fighting for, and then close the door on the option to leave if it's worth fighting for, and find the tools, the understanding, the support, the skills you need to get better yourself and to invest in the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say that the relationship, it's a similar, very similar point. If this person, think back to what the person was that you started the relationship with what they were like then. And if that person, if you'd like to get that person back again, you absolutely can. They might be in a slightly different form to what you thought they were going to be, but you can absolutely get back to that. What's probably happened here is the will to keep the relationship alive has drained. You can get that will back. To get that will back, you're absolutely going to have to learn to develop the skill. If you can develop the skill, you can rebuild the will. And then you get back to what we call mutual satisfaction. We talk about that in the book. But you can absolutely get back to that place. And if you don't learn the skills now, you're going to have to learn them somewhere else. So,
in the next relationship.
You might as well. Yeah. As they say, the grass might be green on the other side, but it too has to be mowed. So learn the skills or you're going to find yourself back in the same place. So.
Yeah. No, and I think as well, you mentioned earlier about the hurdles. As you say, one relationship will have hurdles, so will another. That's the way it is. But I think the thing I loved about what you've just said there is the fact that if you think back to the person you first met and that's the person you want to be with, well, then there is a way. Things might not be quite what you thought, but that is such a sense of hope, because I think in those early times, it's the friendship, it's all the things you spoke about, the bliss moment that you described earlier. And it's possible to still get that back, which is so encouraging. Okay, so very, very quickly, because we've run out of time actually, but where can people find out more about your workshops and how can they get hold of your book? Do you have one to wave around for us?
We do, actually. Funny you should say that. Here's the book.
So there's the book, which I have read, and I've just got the last few chapters, but I loved it. I think I really endorse it and say, get hold of one of these. But where can they go for your book?
Well, Amazon's the easiest place to say. And then to find out anything about us and the work that we do, the website, the4habits.com, number 4, the4habits.com. And that you can get to the book, you can get to the workshops, you can get to everything.
Online courses, all sorts of things on there. Just the4habits.com. You can find out that all on there. And the book is called The 4 Habits of All Successful Relationships. If you're searching on Amazon or all other good booksellers near you, as they say.
The 4 Habits.
Or you can, of course, put a message in the chat for this particular video, and I can give you information.
There you go. Even better.
John and Andrea, honestly, just such a pleasure to hear your story. I'm really grateful that you've been so very open and honest and about how things have been, because that's what enables other people to have a sense of hope that actually they can face the hurdles, they can go back to that moment of, this is who I fell in love with, this is where my relationship began. And the fact that if you're hearing this today and you're interested in this book, please remember that it's for couples, but it's great in a workplace situation, it's great for parenting. I mean, literally, it says all relationships, because that's what it's for. So do get hold of that. So thank you again. Thank you very much for listening today. Please do like the video. Please subscribe to the channel and please share with other people. Thank you very much for listening to The Relationship Hub.